All right, episode 7, 8, something like that. I think 7. We're going to get the shock mounts welded in today. I cut the factory stuff out and then drew these up and got them laser cut. So this cutout is the same diameter as the tube on the frame. So it should be pretty quick and easy to weld that. Famous last words, I suppose. I did a bunch of messing around getting the height of everything sorted out. It would have been a really long, boring video. It's like a couple millimeters here and a couple millimeters there. So where the bike's sitting right now on the lift is where the fully extended height on the rear suspension is going to be. So I can just drop this shock in, put the lower bolts in, line this up, tack them, and then we can get them fully welded and then start reassembling the bike. So a couple of people asking about lighting coveralls on fire with the last episode. These are Nomex, so they're flame resistant. So when I got sparks flying all over the place, these are actually the one of the best ways to keep that from happening, keep that from burning bits and pieces. So in the last episode when I was in here with the plasma torch, I dumped a bunch of water on these actually just to make them that much more flame resistant. So I want to make sure I'm not dropping sparks on the, or not sparks, but, well, sparks, yeah, sure. From welding, I don't want to get, I don't want to cover the shock in splatter, and I don't want to drop any splatter on the hose between the reservoir and the shock. That would make a mess. If more things were open, I would go, we get a chunk of metal that was the right size and actually make a dummy shock to put in here of just solid rod. I kind of looked around a little bit. I don't have what I need. So unfortunately, I'm going to tack it with the shock in here itself. So I need to make sure I do a good job of getting this wrapped up. The clearance that I was concerned about is right here. And it's, honest to God, a millimeter right there. There's a casting line here, right here. And I'm going to shave that off. So things move around and flex a little bit when you're actually riding a bike. The frame flexes, everything moves a little bit. So you can have clearance when the bike is sitting, you can measure it, it's all good. And then you start riding and the things hit that, you know, have quite a bit of clearance. So just to make sure you don't have any issues. My primary concern with that would be if the spring is contacting that pivot. The pivot's actually like stronger than the shock. When it's fully extended, there's not a lot of space between the bushings, so you can get a little bit of a knock in there, and I'm worried about a little bit of side load on the shock when it's fully extended at its weakest point, that I may take out the bushing seals, etc. in the shock. Just that little bit of pressure over and over and over might cause some scoring on one side of the shaft or the bushing. Don't know, maybe none of those things would happen. Probably would be okay, but it's not worth the risk. It's easy enough to take that out right now and just do a little bit of clearancing on it. So I'm going to do that. So while I've got this out, I'm going to put some extra grease in here. Just looking at how it's shipped. It's pretty dry. All of these are pretty dry. I got one last thing to do to make room for that new shock in the mount. On the bottom of the airbox, there's this little bump out here, and what it is, right in here, there's a hole. It's a plastic post, and when your air filter goes on, there's a screw that comes in the bottom of the air filter and goes into that hole, and then there's 4 more bolts that hold the top together. So this is the factory Yamaha setup. This is the new super cool filter from Gluggatech. I never pronounced that right. Guglatech. So out of Italy. They make some really cool shit. So it's these guys here. And they make some really cool filters for bikes. So by switching to this, I'm getting better filtration. I'm getting a reusable filter. It's oiled, so it's going to do better in the dust. And I don't have that screw through the bottom. This guy just gets pinched on the top. So because I don't have that screw, I can cut this post off and then seal it up. The issue with this post is that it's right over top of the new shock mount. So this actually is going to hit the mount or the top of the shock. I'm not sure just yet, but just measurements, I can see that that's going to be an issue. So we're going to cut this off flush and then seal that hole, and then we'll use the new air filter, and we should be good to go to get the bike reassembled. So all I got to do is just reassemble, in theory. So I'm just going to blast through this, no commentary on it, just going to get it done. Something I forgot about just when I went to put this back together, this is a bracket that holds a couple of brake lines on the other side of the bike, and it normally piggybacks onto the bolt hole for the rear shock, but we've moved the shock up so the hole's here. So I'm hoping I'm going to cut this section off, and then I'm going to just bend this around so it's pointed the other direction and see whether I can make that work or not. Seems like the easiest way to tackle this. So there's this little tweaked part here that gives it some rigidity, so it's not going to want to fold with that. So I'm going to have to cut that. There's no way it's going to bend otherwise. So there's the hard lines here that have the fittings on them, And then there's studs, which I've never seen before. I don't usually see studs. Normally there'd be welded nuts in here. Then you put bolts through. So because these are hard lines, they don't really like to move too much. So it's a bit of a challenge getting these on. So that's kind of what I'm messing with right here. So my original plan to mount this was to make a bracket here with a tube, and we're going to put it here. A couple issues with that. I don't have material, suitable material to make a bracket off of here right now, and it leaves me terrible access here for the compression adjuster on the reservoir. So I'm actually going to, there's a ton of room in here. So normally the shock's got a piggyback reservoir on it, so there's lots of room for that in here. But even then, actually, this would be a good spot for a storage, a tool holder kind of situation. So I just made up a simple bracket here, and I'm going to go from a rear pillion peg mount bolt over to the other side, and then the reservoir will strap on top of here. I would rather have it out here as a little more airflow, just to keep things a little bit cooler. But we've got quite a bit of air around it in here. But for now, this is what I'm gonna do. It's Sunday and we're in the middle of an apocalypse, so I kind of beggars can't be choosers. So even these aren't going on a round tube. I'm gonna try and use them here on the flat. See how this works out. Well, that took way longer than it should have. That was a giant pain in the ass. So I'll do something better in here. I'm not sure what. Maybe flat bar here, and then chunk of aluminum tube across here so these fit a little bit better. But for the time being, that's in a good spot. I've got easy access to the adjuster on the other side, even with the mud flap in here. I know I'm going to get a bunch of questions about these. What are they? What do they do? Why are they there? Google Stegs pegs. They're made in Australia, and they, when you're standing here, there's a rubber puck here that hits the back of your boot. So when you're standing, you have a more solid base and you don't have to grab the bars so tight. So I find on European bikes, the center line distance between the bars and the foot pegs is longer than on Japanese bikes. 1090, 1190 compared to Africa Twin is almost 5 inches different. So when you're standing up, if you're a tall rider especially, you're standing up, you're hanging on really tight. You don't have the base that you do on some of the European bikes. So same thing with this Yamaha. I noticed, it was the first thing I noticed. It gives you, my leg bend is better on this bike because my feet aren't kind of behind me. They're out front. It's a little more comfortable for sitting. But when I'm getting into the nasty stuff and you're standing, especially on big hill climbs, I just find the amount that I have to hang on is really tough. I have a hard time gripping the bike as hard as I need to. Just feel kind of cramped in that regard. So the Stegs pegs work really well. The puck itself is Stegs pegs. This is a bracket I made. I have not seen a kit for the T7 yet from the actual company. As soon as they come out, I'll end up swapping these out to their version, but had them on the Africa Twin. I've got them on the 790. Had them on the 1190 as well. So check them out. They work really, really well. I'm a big fan. All right, I think we're actually wrapped up here. Reservoir's mounted, shock is mounted. I have not messed with the rear sag setting yet. I got to get all geared up, full backpack and everything with water weight and all that stuff, tools, and helmet and neck brace and blah, blah, blah. And then I can set the sag. And then I can go out for a run and start messing with clickers and see how it goes. So thank you for watching. Any questions, as always, in the comments section or fire me an email, info@camel-adv.com. Thanks for watching.